Hey there, everybody. Here we are, another episode, an interview with a New Age Christian. Christopher Teasdale is in the house.
Hi, everybody.
So, Christopher, I have mentioned him on probably, 3 or 4 of the episodes at this point, and we're only like 12 episodes in, so you're in a third of the episodes, at least by name.
Yeah.
So as a reminder or a public service announcement, these interviews with New Age Christians, the intention is to organically define what it is to be a New Age Christian, what New Age Christianity believes, the common experiences that we have as someone who's stood up and built newagechristianity.org, started a podcast and writing blogs and everything like that. Clearly, there's a lot of the definition of this that I'm creating, but in the end, just because I carry something doesn't mean that the average everyday New Age Christian carries those same things. And so in the end, just as Christianity doesn't necessarily always look like Jesus,
That's true.
New Age Christianity isn't always necessarily going to look like me. And so I want to introduce people to other New Age Christians, and hopefully over time we can really develop an identity, and that these conversations and other people would help define what that is. Mm-hmm. So here you are, as this is the third interview that I'll have done. We already did one with Kaylee and one with Kat. Mm-hmm. And as my introduction to Christopher Teasdale, he has, of all the people in this, when I say we and us, with New Age Christianity, of all the people, by far, you have been the most engaged in this journey with me. You've been one of my best friends for 14 years now?
14 years, yeah.
Oh my gosh. I'm getting close to being half of our lives as being best friends. That's
amazing.
And we're missing the other one in this crew would be Jason Tonneson, who and he wasn't with us for a couple of years because we lived in different places. So
That's right. Yeah.
It really has been primarily you and me.
Yeah.
So I've been looking forward to introducing you to the people and people to you. So say hello to the people.
Man, it's so nice to be on here, and I look forward to every podcast because it's so much part of my heart. So
for sure,
awesome. It's awesome.
Oh my gosh. Well, to dive right in, I am assuming at this point you do identify as a New Age Christian.
That's true. Yeah.
So what does being a New Age Christian mean to you?
It means to me freedom. And I would say that it doesn't mean freedom from, it means freedom to.
Can you unpack that?
Yeah, because a lot of us come out of something. So we're being given freedom to come out of something. But
Right.
You can only come out of something for so long. So for myself, it's freedom to express, freedom to grow, freedom to create, freedom to do introspection so you can truly be yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And that, in a nutshell, is what I believe New Age Christianity is for me.
That's beautiful. And I do know a lot of us for years struggled I know what I don't believe anymore.
Right.
I know what I'm not
Yeah.
anymore. I'm not this, I'm not that. I don't believe this, I don't believe that. But yeah, the ability to, what do I replace this with?
Yeah, because you can only hold the vibration of freedom from for so long. It's like the picture of being a slave and then being free. Well, I was freed from,
Right.
but now what am I freed to be and to do and to express and to create?
So what are some of the difference between where you came from? So you were born and raised Christian. We should probably introduce people to your history a bit. I forget, we're so close. It's like all the stuff I just automatically know about you.
Yeah.
So,
no, I was born and raised a charismatic Christian. My parents were missionaries and have been for the majority of my life, with various denominations, but majority with Pentecostal style Christianity, Protestant Christianity.
Okay.
And so I believe that it gave me a firm foundation in the Word. It gave me a firm foundation in the Bible. But it also gave me the ability to do a little bit of adventure spiritually,
okay,
in the Christian realm. Because that would be, something that would be the opposite of that would be that you're in a very strict liturgical type of
right,
Christianity or religion where you cannot express or go out or color outside the lines at all.
right.
And had I grown up in that kind of environment, I think I'd be a completely different individual than I am today.
For sure. Having spent, been on staff in a liturgical church before, and having my younger brother he's not liturgical, but he's certainly in one of the more traditional mindsets. It's very,
right.
There is absolutely a subculture or a subconscious freedom inside of the more charismatic Christian denominations that says there's, it's I guess you have to be a little bit more free to talk about angels and miracles and push into prophecy and stuff like that. So.
Right. I won't say that I found much within it, but I did find the first pieces of my identity within that, because there is a lot that can be lost within that I would say genre of Christian religion.
Right.
Just because a modern Western culture has taken that and turned it into a monster that I know not of. It's just something that's way out there. And but it did give me the understanding of what prophecy is.
Mm-hmm.
Gave me an understanding of what the spirit realm was, to some degree. But it was a basis and a foundation. I won't say that it was super firm, but I will say that it was the start, and I am thankful for that. So they were, my parents were charismatic Protestant missionaries, most of the time in Africa,
right,
Eastern Europe, and some in South America and Central America. But so I grew up constantly traveling and not knowing where was home. And home, not having home, is kind of a interesting thing, because it's not just geographical. You learn that internally you don't really know where home is. And it set me on a quest to discover what was home. Because everyone would talk about, well, I'm going home for Christmas, or I'm going home for this or for that. And I would never understand really what that was.
In the charismatic circles, did they talk about, like, your home church?
Yes, commonly. And then I would hear it, and it would always hit a chord within me that was, there was a little bit of dissonance, because I never knew what that was. So finding home for me spiritually was a quest that drew me coming out of that into more maturity. It was, that was a very significant point in my life as well. And again, if I wasn't raised a missionary, I probably wouldn't have been seeking as much.
Sure. What's interesting is you said finding home for you spiritually. At the same time, you defined New Age Christianity right out of the gate as freedom.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I can't help but think of the typology of Israel,
Yes.
When they come into the promised land, that's home. But once they're in the promised land, you're talking about a massive territory to discover.
Absolutely.
And that each tribe would go find their boundaries, and that when you if you look at the prophecies about that you would get houses that you did not build and vineyards you did not plant and wells you did not dig, you have to go discover that.
That's right.
Right? You have to actually, yes, this is home, but in it being home, it is a vast, and I would say New Age Christianity fits that for those of us who might be wanderers.
Yes.
Because I was as well, right? My story's a bit different in the sense that I didn't grow up a missionary's kid. I grew up in a wealthy household in Phoenix, Arizona, Christian private school.
Yeah.
And for me, I think my catalyst was when my parents got divorced when I was 14.
Yeah.
And it was a point at which I intentionally, in some ways I feel bad, in other ways it is what it is, but I remember the conversation with my mother where I told her, I was like, I love you and Dad, but you have forfeited your position in my life as modeling the people I want to become. Right. And I'm going to go find mentors, and I'm going to
find it. Yeah.
And I intentionally set out, almost like Abraham, I set out from my father's territory, and I decided I'm going to go find something better.
Yeah.
And, but in New Age Christianity, that wanderer or that explorer kind of has never had to be set aside. I haven't had to settle and be like, okay, now this is all I believe in and no more.
Yeah. You learn that the boundaries are vast.
Mm-hmm.
And you learn also that much of all of humanity is looking for acceptance, and what they traditionally find is acceptance from home.
Mm-hmm.
So then spiritually, you're looking for acceptance in a home, so to speak, where you can break bread with someone and have commonality. Mm-hmm. Not sameness, but commonality. And it's a journey that I think all of humanity's on. So
I find it fascinating to consider that you can define a spiritual construct known as Christianity, New Age Christianity, and in it to genuinely say nothing is off limits.
That's right.
Right?
Yeah.
There is the boundary is so vast you can almost functionally say there isn't one. Mm-hmm. There are a few landmarks, such as who Jesus is when he's logic. I think that was episode number 4. If you haven't listened to the podcast episode of number 4, talking about the Logos, talking about Jesus, and who he is to this group. And then you have other landmarks such as honor and freedom and preferring one another. So it's not that there isn't points at which we kind of all choose to agree, but to call them boundaries, you cannot go past this. I mean, that
doesn't exist in this.
I think this is a group of professional,
boundary breakers.
Yeah, exactly. What's the term for people who blow stuff up for a living?
Oh, demolition. Yeah.
We're demolition experts. This New Age Christianity community is filled with people who are like, oh, there's a boundary. Get my C4.
Yep. I'm gonna
get my Semtex.
Blow it out and find out what's on the other side of fear. We've talked personally before of what that membrane is like, passing through the membrane of fear. And knowing what is on the other side of that is always a treasure.
Yes.
There's always something to be discovered that if you had not passed through that membrane of fear, whether it's social, relational, spiritually, then you would never have discovered what was on the other side of that. So within this, absolutely you're right. There's not boundaries.
Yeah, it's I think you're probably looking at a subculture of people that if we were to give them boundaries, they would rebel. It would turn into a target.
That's right. Yeah.
Here's your boundary. Sweet. Thanks for giving me my next goal.
Oh, a boundary? Okay. I'm going to go for that. Yeah. I wanted to mention in that light with New Age Christianity, you would see it as religion, but I think that what people have missed with religion is using it as a tool as opposed to creating sameness. Our Creator never intended for sameness, otherwise you would look identical to me and I'd look identical to you, and we'd act exactly the same and all of that. But where's the beauty in that? He created so that there could be complete and utter difference and find commonality, but not sameness. That's not the point. And most religions of the earth have taken sameness and made it the mantra, as opposed to finding a common tool to use in life and discovering the beauty of difference from one another.
I heard somebody actually yesterday, so one of the other projects I work on is the epic.org, and we're starting to record a weekly podcast where it's a group of us, we're journeying on together, and then we're essentially just recording that journey, right? And they've ordered podcasts and blogs and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And it's pretty fun. It's actually given me an opportunity to just get back into some intentional growth.
Sure.
You and I for years have sent each other YouTube videos and blogs and little snippets here and there, because intentionally maturing and intentionally becoming something we wanted to be is very important to us. And that's probably what's kept our friendship so strong.
Absolutely.
Is because we share that. But in the last year and a half, starting the Epic, NAC, and other projects, it has been difficult to find the time to do that.
Yeah.
And so this has been actually pretty exciting for 2019, being able to get back into that. All that to say, this last week the topic was living life in a digital age.
Yeah.
And I found a guy, I don't know if you've heard of Alain de Botton. Alain de Botton, I think it is. And it's a dude. It's spelled Alain with an A.
Okay.
It's a cool name. Anyway, and he is an atheist. And he's got a TED Talk called Atheism 2.0. I actually posted it on New Age Christianity. But in there, he talks about exactly what you're saying, taking religion and removing the dogma, but realizing what religion has learned tool-wise, what religion has learned how to do really, really well. And it was the first time I had ever really heard somebody articulate the values of that community, and even he does talk about repetition, and the value of it. He talks about when you go to school and they teach you, Edgar Allan Poe, and 40 years later, after you've spent a career as an accountant, you're supposed to also remember Edgar Allan Poe, and that's just not how we work. And religion's figured that out.
That's right.
And they say, hey, every year you celebrate this, every week you do this, every day you do this, and that repetition but viewing religion, and he does a really good job of viewing religion as an institution that has created tools. Yeah. And that those tools have given us this really beautiful value. Yeah. And I think I listened to it, I was like, oh my gosh, this is New Age Christianity minus one ingredient. He doesn't believe in God. Right. I'm like, because everything else is exactly.
Yeah. Well, see, religion has had the tool of that repetition and of ritual, and all that religion has been seeking for in those rituals and in their culture is finding home. So if you know what it's like to walk out of a very familiar religion in traditional Christianity, well, immediately you find yourself floundering because you're trying to figure out which way is up. Yep. And you're on this journey, and it starts to feel very lonely.
Yeah,
and
for sure.
And one of the things that religion does provide is ritual and commonality, which is where people find the semblance of home. So then, when that's removed, and you are floundering and trying to discover, and you find commonality in something like a podcast like this, where people find the commonality of that spiritual journey, right? then they're starting to find ritual and home and all of that. And it's the most beautiful thing humanity has, is home, that safety, that the beauty of that sharing. Yeah.
So I'm gonna take what you just said.
Yeah.
I'm gonna make a marketing clip, because that is absolutely the point of this project.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
It was. So what would you say? I mean, give or take 100 people at any given time.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we've been as few in number as 4.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
And we've been as prolific in our associations as hundreds of people.
Many, yeah.
You know, and anywhere in between, this journey where people have come and gone and come and gone.
Yeah.
We've been fortunate to have a relationship this entire. Well, even there was about a year and a half where you and I weren't really connected.
Right. Yeah.
And it just seems to be. There's been seasons where my wife and I haven't necessarily been on the same page. In my recent journeys back to quote unquote the Father's house and everything like that,
Yeah.
there was about a year where she just wasn't feeling it. You know,
Yeah.
so there is a measure of aloneness,
Mm-hmm.
even if you're in company,
It's true.
and finding who it is you need to become. And this is, oh my gosh, that to me that is the reason for the 12 tribes, typologically speaking.
Absolutely, yeah.
You talked about us. Not being the same. I mean, logic dictates that who I am actually illuminates who you're not.
Absolutely, yeah.
Right? You wouldn't know that you're a male if females didn't exist.
If they didn't exist, yeah.
Because everything would just be male, right?
Right.
You wouldn't know that you're, what are you, 5'11"?
Yeah, 5'10".
You know,
yeah.
if there wasn't something other than 5'11". If
Right.
everything was 5'11", you would
know that there was a difference. Yeah.
So the fact that there's variety is actually the point.
Absolutely.
Because it frames who we actually are.
Yeah.
And we look at variety, a lot of people, just like Adam and Eve did,
Mm-hmm.
they looked at their difference between them and God as proof that they weren't.
Right. As
And
I am not.
As opposed to as proof that they are.
Right.
Philosophically, there's a lot in there.
So much.
I've unpacked a few things. Chris and I, we've sat over, I don't know, a few thousand cigars over the years. And we know exactly what each other means, but it's variety and community and that journey. If New Age Christianity can be a home for people, then I would say mission accomplished.
Absolutely.
So,
yeah. I have something to add to that. It's that belief is vitally important. Obviously, we know it vibrationally and what it creates and what it destroys. And we know how it affects the body. If we believe that it's the problem, we're gonna have physical problems.
right.
Well, I've never really shared this part of who I am, but I believe that it is virtually impossible for any two humans to believe exactly the same. Metaphysically, and through the study of neuroplasticity and neurology and all of that, you know that someone's, even if we're twins, born of the same mother and experience as much as possible the same controls in life, to have the same experiences, our two beliefs cannot be the same. It's virtually impossible. So it is proof to me that sameness is not the end result. Sameness is not the end result. Oneness is, and acceptance that someone's on a different journey is the end result.
Mm-hmm.
Sameness is not. The many-faceted gem that humanity is the beauty of how we've been created.
Oneness versus sameness.
Yeah.
I mean, you can meditate on that for years.
Yeah.
And I think at the core of that you find the heart cry of humanity is oneness.
Mm-hmm.
And I think many people have mistaken it for sameness.
Yeah.
And therefore we then argue against each other as opposed to preferring one another.
Yeah. And for me, that is the picture of probably the paramount thing that religion has gotten wrong.
Yes.
Around the world, is that belief needs to be exactly the same, or you're not a part of the club, you know. And whereas in this type of environment that is accepting and allowing someone to find home without boundaries, then we know that belief can differ and find acceptance and home in the same breath.
It's one of those. I have, as a teacher, I have pushed against the challenge of realizing that to be a teacher, you have to have some goal in mind.
Yes.
Of getting people to the quote-unquote right answer.
Right.
And it's the right answer that you believe. Mm-hmm. Yet at the same time, I've known, I've embraced, I have celebrated the fact that next week I will believe things that I don't currently believe. And if I were to... I don't know if I've ever... No, that's actually not true. I had a major experience when we were first becoming good friends that I found myself teaching at the church I was employed at. Yeah. And then the next week I recanted what I said the week before. And then the week after that I recanted my recant.
Yeah.
Because I was right, but I just didn't know that I was right in the way that I was right.
Yeah.
Right. And so you hold as a teacher like this, like we all need to believe the same, quote unquote, or you need to believe what I believe.
Yeah.
Yet I fully value the fact that actually if you do believe everything I believe, then why are you here?
Right, exactly.
Right, because the world only needs one of me.
This is right, yeah.
And the world only needs one of you.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to get people to be like me? Clearly not.
Right.
The goal is help you become fully you.
Yeah.
And there's some common identity issues, right? I think it is safe to assume that we all need to believe that we are God in the flesh. It's safe to assume that we all need to believe that we're righteous and that we're good,
right,
and we're creators. But those are just the root foundational beliefs of which everything. There is no two trees that have grown exactly the same.
Yeah, because
the wind and a squirrel stands on this branch long enough, and it just changes the trajectory of that branch's growth that this variety, even if it's subtle, is absolutely the point.
That's right. Yeah. If we looked at belief like a seed, and if we looked at it as something that grows, it means and it implies that there's going to be change with the belief. Even if you believe that love is wonderful. You and I can believe that love is wonderful, but in different varying levels, our belief of that love will grow, and the wind in your life may turn it to the left a bit, and to my life it may turn it to the right a bit. It still is the belief that love is wonderful, but there's variance on purpose.
and that is, I think that's the point of what we're like to get through to the audience. Everyone knows everybody's different.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people have this kind of subconscious like, well, I guess I need to accept it.
Yeah.
Sure. How about the idea of embracing it and actually celebrating and realizing, oh my goodness, God himself, herself, is experiencing being in a way that he has never experienced in and through you.
That's right.
And that is why we were created. That's why the entire universe came into being. Because in the beginning was the I am, the singular I am, in which everything was the same. And everything was him, and everything was one and the same. And the goal is to be one with variety, to be one with difference, to be one with the ability to frame each other. And the beauty of individual expression. And
that's the new expression and the new variance and the new growth in God.
Yes. As God.
It's God growing and expressing and discovering newness.
I think there's a teaching on the website already. The teaching I did in the basement a few years ago. God 2.0.
Yeah.
That God is becoming a new expression of himself in and through us. Before us, he didn't have a body.
Yeah.
And that is, by very definition, sameness is the antithesis of the point.
Right.
And I think New Age Christianity, it's going to be a challenge long term, 2,000 years before the next age, and I believe this is the final age. It will be a challenge for New Age Christianity to hold that vibration. Mm-hmm. That variety is the point. Mm-hmm. But I think we can do it.
I believe so. If you look at nature, you can see that everything that was started and created has grown. Everything.
Yes.
You look at a tree, you look at a human, you look at an animal, you look at from Let There Be Light all the way through. Everything has grown and has never stopped growing. Our understanding of that is also growing.
Yes. Yes, it's both. Oh my gosh, so much. So you and I have no trouble getting into...
we can go in the deep end.
Yeah, real quick. Yeah. But this one, I do want to... So did you find your journey to becoming a New Age Christian, was there anything that was difficult about it?
You mean besides everything?
What was the most difficult, or maybe draw out a few of the... because there's other people out there who are in the process of, well, I know what I don't believe, right? They've left Egypt, but they have no clue where the hell they're going.
Right.
So...
one of the first things that you discover in coming out of what you've been familiar with, no matter what that religion might be, or no matter what that upbringing might be, is that once you come out of it, loneliness seems to be a thing. Mm-hmm. It may not be as severe as you think it is right at first, but it is something you have to discover where it fits and what its purpose is for you. Because I think a lot of it is actually to draw you to introspection, as opposed to everything that I'm missing out of because of the culture I came out of, or because of the religion that I left, or that communion, that I left. Look at loneliness as an actual opportunity for introspection and finding out what is on the inside, and if you're okay with being by yourself. Because you can be your best friend if you're okay with that, but it takes quite a journey to find that.
It certainly does. And there's levels of it.
Absolutely.
Right. You find it on one level. I've learned this lesson.
Yeah.
The Holy Spirit's like, I'll talk to you next year.
Yeah.
I learned it even deeper. Yeah, I'll talk to you about 2 years from now.
Yeah.
And, for me, that culminated most recently reading the book, The Four Agreements.
Oh, yeah. Beautiful.
And the story for me on how that came to me was obviously, absolutely the Holy Spirit wanted me to read it. And I walked away. I was telling my wife, Joanie, about, what my takeaway was. And she read it. She was like, how did you get that? And I'm like, well, that's how the Holy Spirit works. And, he prepared me for a particular lesson. And it was absolutely, if you become the type of person that, and the four agreements are that you take, don't take anything personally, don't assume,
keep
be impeccable
promises to yourself,
be impeccable with your word, and do your best. Always do your best.
Yes.
And when you become that person, and on the deepest level that I currently understand, which is pretty freaking deep, that if you become so much that person, you essentially become immovable.
Yeah.
And the world cannot manipulate you. The people you love cannot manipulate you. Circumstances cannot manipulate you. And you are a very pure and most beautiful definition of being alone.
Yeah.
Right. And I look at Jesus. I think this dude never was alone physically. I mean, he was always, and he would, actually that's not true. He would pull himself away to go be alone. Right. But I mean, imagine being him in the world. Like, he was the very definition of alone on a fallen world that had not yet understood its righteousness and yet understood its sonship. And you, at some point, if you want to be like Christ, you have to fully embrace your I am regardless.
Yeah. What's amazing to discover in that loneliness and why people fear it so much is because of the mind. So they're not okay with hearing the nonsense that comes with their mind all the time, because it tends to drive them crazy. You know, we know from Scripture, taking every thought into captivity, and we know it as, you know, a passing glance of Scripture.
Right.
But it becomes very real when you're by yourself. And it becomes something that once you have allowed thoughts to come in and to go freely, as opposed to holding them and thinking about them constantly and meditating over them constantly, even though they're not serving you any good purpose. Allowing them to flow in and out is imperative to you being able to navigate the waters of the journey of a new spiritual dynamic, new spiritual growth.
Yeah, I mean, that the voice in there says, I shouldn't be thinking this.
Yeah.
I should. Oh my gosh, how did I think that? How could I doubt this? Or how could... You have to let it flow. That's right. Because it is. It's coming from... Everything's energy, and it's coming from the inside. That's right. I gave this audience, by this point, knows Kat. And I was speaking with her, I believe it was yesterday. And some of the stuff that she's going through is kind of along the lines of being alone. And I encouraged her. I said, you know, you should take some time to do some mirror work.
Oh yeah, it's beautiful.
Like, look yourself in the eyes in the mirror. Yes. When you're crying. Yes. When you're happy. When you're indifferent. When you're curious. Take every opportunity you can. When you're washing your hands, we all go to the bathroom a couple times a day, right? Right. Assuming you wash your hands. Yeah. You know, hopefully. You're going to stare at a mirror at least a couple times a day. Whenever you're looking at that mirror, look yourself in the eyes and open up to what the Spirit would say to you, what your soul would say to you.
There's such a high bar that we set for ourselves in most areas of life, especially internally. We set these bars that are unattainable, that are just something that is complete nonsense and that you shouldn't have set in the first place. And we hold ourselves to that, and then we get down on ourselves because we could not pass that bar. Well, the first thing in doing that mirror work that I discovered was compassion on myself.
Oh my gosh.
I didn't even know where this compassion was coming from, but in staring very closely into my own eyes, I discovered that I had the right and the ability to take it easy on myself in every area of life, to hold myself to account to what I needed to, but to not hold myself to a bar that was unattainable as well.
It's an interesting mix, because I remember one specific time, I don't know if you call them a session or whatever, but mirror, time in the mirror. And it was the perfect balance of, I was very disappointed in myself. And I was being honest with myself about why I was disappointed. And I thought it was, you didn't reach this bar, therefore you suck, try harder, do better, you're still going to suck, you're never going to reach it. And it wasn't that. And it was the being honest with myself and why I was disappointed with myself was more philosophically underpinning the fact that I had given myself a bar. That I had, and it was like, Austin, you're setting yourself up for failure. And it was like this deeply honest, because you can be honest with yourself and realize, hey, you're full of shit. Right. But in that honesty, realizing, and the reason you're full of shit is because your expectations are shit. So let those go. And it's like this mix of compassion and honesty. And you do that enough times, and you will know yourself. You'll know thyself. Absolutely. Yeah.
And it's the greatest discovery. As much as you can discover the universe and how much we haven't discovered the depths of the sea, discovering ourselves is going to be the most beautiful discovery you will ever encounter in your life. I've been around the world and seen all these places and things, but there's nothing as fulfilling, as comforting as finding home inside.
Do you think that has anything to do with why Jesus was driven into wilderness?
Absolutely, because at some point all the noise must stop. all the expectations of others have to stop, and you have to decide where you stand. Yeah, that story of being in the wilderness like that is...
And the 3 temptations.
Yeah.
I should do a podcast on that soon.
It's a powerful one.
Yeah, those 3 temptations really are the core of humanity's challenge.
All of humanity can benefit from understanding that.
Yeah.
It didn't matter what book it came from. It's...
Yeah, I mean, and yeah, there are multiple versions of that story.
Yeah.
Jesus lived it out.
Yeah.
So I'm curious to move on with the interview side of things. Because I'm interviewing you, Chris.
Okay.
I'm curious. So when somebody asks you what you believe, or what group, where do you go to church, or that age, especially when you're coming out of, I'm sure that we have a large majority of people listening to this podcast who were known as Christians, or were known as whatever community. If you're on a journey, the people that are in your life at some point go, well, where do you go to church now?
Right.
Or what do you believe now? Or
yeah.
So what do you say when people ask you those questions?
Well, very recently, as of the last year of my life, and it may change tomorrow, just so you know, beliefs grow and change as we said, like a seed. But as of recently, my expression to them is very on purpose, and I feel like Spirit really led me to this. Was I had people asking me constantly online and through email and through text and just in person, so what is it that you believe? And my answer to them now is that, and it sounds a bit spiteful, but it's not. It has very strong intention behind it. Is it doesn't matter what I believe. It matters what you believe.
Sure.
And if you can think of it with a mirror between us, if you then said the same thing to me, what kind of transaction is taking place vibrationally when the responsibility of belief actually is placed on the one asking that?
It's always assumed. Like people, inside their question is the assumption that your beliefs somehow are important enough to me for it to matter.
And all it is really is the I am not speaking out.
Right.
And saying, share with me what you believe, because I probably need to know that as what I believe as opposed to what I already believe.
Right.
and the true discovery is in them looking internally. So it actually doesn't matter what I believe. It matters what they believe. And it's met with a bit of, it's met with a bit of vinegar at first, but then they actually get the point of it.
I too have found it interesting that when you get people who ask that question, I would say 99 times out of 100, they are not asking it introspectively.
True.
They're asking it probably a bit judgy, right?
Yes. Oh, yeah.
What is it you believe? Because I need to know if you're acceptable or not.
Yeah. Are you part of the club? There's a bit of an inquisition going on.
Right.
Yeah.
The occasional person will go, I really like who you are. What is it that you believe? And it is more of an introspective, and that's the person when you say, it doesn't matter what I believe, they'll go, oh my gosh, thank you so much, bro. Because they are coming from an introspective reason.
It's true.
So when you yourself, those listening to this podcast, when you ask other people their beliefs, there's nothing wrong with that.
Right.
But are you asking as an accuser? Are you asking as someone who's going to now draw judgment on their beliefs and whether or not you can hang out with them?
Right.
Or are you asking because you see something in them that you genuinely are curious? Like, what is it that you believe that would cause you to say that or do that?
Yeah.
I think there's a vast difference in energy.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Definitely.
Yeah.
You can feel it immediately.
Yeah.
It's like walking into a room where you know that there's been an argument between two people. Nothing is said, but you immediately excuse yourself and walk out the room. And walking into a room where there's a difference between that and walking into a room where there's like a surprise party for you, where there's complete acceptance.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you can feel it.
The energy.
Vibrationally, yeah.
I've never actually I've used the one about arguing.
Yeah.
I've never drawn the comparison of like, the when there's a room where you're about to be celebrated.
Yeah, that's...
Like, hopefully, some people have never experienced that.
Yeah.
Unfortunately.
Hopefully they feel it here.
Right?
That would be a good thing. Yeah.
So, I have 2 more questions for you.
Go for it.
And so, is there anything you miss about your old way of being?
Is there anything that I miss about that? I would say, to be honest, some of the ritual. Now I'm learning where to place that energy now to create my own ritual. From meditating and learning and growing and all of that. But because now I know to view what I came out of and out of religion as a tool, I'm now looking back at it for what I can gain from it to use as a tool. And the one thing from that would be ritual. Because if for instance, humanity, people have not experienced consistency in life because they never had a consistent mother, they never had a consistent father, and there was zero consistency and they had nothing that they could depend on.
Mm-hmm.
When they do find religion, they find it almost with a massive amount of codependency, like a drug addict. Because then the rituals provide for consistency,
right,
and stability. And you can now take that same energy and utilize it in your own life for what good you can draw from it. And it doesn't matter whether that is your ritual of smudging or whether it's your ritual of prayer and, a sit spot, for instance,
Yeah.
It doesn't matter what that looks like, but if you've taken that ritual, I think honestly you have something to pass on. I have children, and then I also have people that are growing in their understanding and spiritually look to me like children.
Mm-hmm.
So if they see, like Jesus said, you don't believe what I say, that's fine. Believe my works.
Right.
Look at my works. You don't have to believe what I say. Look at my works. Well, some of those works were ritual.
Yeah, he regularly went away.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, the entire Jewish nation was built around ritual.
Yeah.
Then they were rituals that were pointing to something.
Yes.
And that's where a lot of the modern Christian movement that moving back towards Judaism and those kind of, it's like, oh my gosh, like guys the thing that all those are pointing to showed up 2,000 years ago. Yeah. Anyway, that's a rabbit trail. Ritual is actually, so that's something the Spirit has been, buzzing over in me, about, and even the teaching I referenced that I listened to yesterday about that atheist guy. He talked about the ritual. He talked about the value of repetition. And it's been a conversation that my wife and I have had. I've talked to Kat about it. I've talked to you about it. And this reality that ritual has value only if you find it valuable.
Yes. Yeah.
And I think I would love for New Age Christianity to be able to define this thing in such a way as to say, find your ritual.
Yes.
Yeah. And I think a religious mindset says, you can't invent your own. You're not your own God. You're not your own God. You're not your own priest. And it's like, have you read the Bible? Because you are a priest. You are a king.
A king.
You are your own son. And so yes, by all means, find the ritual that is valuable to you. But by all means, find ritual.
Yeah.
Tony Robbins has his every morning. He does his, what does he call it? 10 to dominate or something. He has some name for it where he takes 10 minutes and does this process and everything.
Yeah.
And,
it's powerful.
I know
it's powerful for the body, for the mind, for you spiritually. You discover things within that time. The rest of the world doesn't affect you. Like I said, it comes in You see it come in and you see it go out.
It's a way to take your temperature.
Absolutely.
Your spirit, we know someone is sick
Yeah.
when they're not at the average, 98.6 degrees.
Right.
We know, you can know that something's wrong or that something is changing or something is morphing in you if you have ritual to come back to.
Yeah.
Now, it takes awareness in the ritual.
Yes.
Right? Any ritual that just becomes rote loses its value.
Yes.
But to say every morning I wake up or every evening I do this or whatever, and you now have a baseline that when I'm doing this, I check in with myself and I know that I am feeling X, Y, and I'm feeling above or below or on point with my average.
Yeah.
And then you can examine why, and then over time you can raise your average.
Yeah.
Raise your
That
temperature.
ritual can become home for you.
Yes.
Internally, and you can carry it anywhere, even if you're away from the place that you call home or from the people that you call home. That ritual can become home for you.
So when you say you miss those, because the question was, what do you miss? Is there specific ones you miss, or are you just saying that you're just now realizing, you're just now pushing into the value of ritual, and that soon enough you won't miss it anymore because you're going to create some?
Yeah, I'm definitely creating them. So I've gone from the place of missing them to discovering that I could create them. And that's been powerful. Along that journey, you also discover that you should not build up and grow the ego with the intent of becoming spiritual. Because people can do that. They can create ritual and they can create all these things in the place that they call home spiritually and unintentionally be growing the ego as opposed to growing in who they are.
You mean those people who just heard us talk about ritual and then they went, I need to go create my ritual. That's how I'm going to, my next journey is I must have my ritual.
If there's anything we've learned through this process is the difference between striving and rest.
Yes. An organic I amness versus inorganic I am notness.
Right. Because that will feel like striving and it's going to create work for you.
Yeah.
As opposed to rest.
People listen to our deep baritone voices and they think these guys are so spiritual. If I want to become like them, I must have a morning ritual. No, that's actually bullshit.
Yeah. Create your own.
There's value and create your own when it is naturally pulling itself out of you.
Absolutely.
If this inspires you, great. But if you're like, oh, it's ritual, just put it in the back of your mind, and 3 years from now, when you're at that point in your journey where he says, all right, now it's time for you to have your ritual, then do it then.
Exactly. Allow that seed its time to germinate. Allow it to go through its winter, so when the sun comes on it, that it sprouts forth and, all that. Everything's got its time.
Absolutely. Yeah. So one last question.
Yeah.
And I ask this of everyone. So what impact do you think New Age Christianity should or could have on the world?
It could impact the world to the point of them becoming one and seeing the diversity and the beautiful facets that have been created within humanity.
Explain that.
Instead of the world looking at one another as, you are other than me, you are the other, we can look at one another as one, because we share vibration, we share so much that we don't even know is going on. And embracing that allows us to understand that we're actually one. We can have different ritual. We can have a different way of living. We can have different lenses to look at life through. But we'll discover compassion and love like never before once we realize that that person that is so-called different than me is actually part of me, because I'm discovering the part of me that I don't see within, I see it without of myself.
The kingdom has only gotten more generous.
Yes.
Right. So for 2,000 years you had a group of people that said they were the chosen ones.
Right.
Right? I'm in, you're out.
Right.
And Jesus came and said, as a matter of fact, your bloodline is irrelevant.
That's right.
Right? And the Gentiles are now included in this in and out.
Yes.
And now the Christians, 2,000 years later, have come in and said, well, you must believe what I believe. You know, whether you're a Jew or a Greek is fine, but you must believe what I believe in order to be in. Yeah. And I think what's coming in the coming age is, hey, here's the secret, guys. You're all in. You've always been in. You've never been out.
Yeah. And
what you're doing is, inside the kingdom, you're discovering yourself.
Yes. This is all inclusive. All inclusive. All encompassing. It doesn't just take on humanity. Creation itself, nature itself will shift and change to the dynamic that we discover about ourselves.
It's the boundaries, so-called, of the kingdom being completely removed.
That's right.
And the only people that are outside of it, outside of that kingdom, are the ones who keep themselves out. Mm-hmm. And those end up, honestly, being the religious people.
That's right.
You know, it ends up being the Christians, the Muslims, the religions we are so familiar with as trying to define who's in and who's out.
Yeah.
And I kind of view it as, you know, if you have this massive circle that's around everyone and it's just never ending, or maybe there's no circle, but inside of this mass of people, there's these little circles called Christianity or Islam or Judaism, and they're saying we're in and you're out, and the reality is, by the fact that they've put a circle around themselves, they're the ones defining that they're actually out.
Yeah.
Right? That they are not. And the rest of humanity and the New Age religion is largely responsible for pushing this kind of oneness or this openness. But I think even the modern secular individual, you know, we're coming into a new age. Absolutely. Yeah. Humanity's consciousness is rising. The technology and the information we have has gotten us to the point where most humans are starting to realize this religion in, out, us versus them thing isn't working.
No.
And we have so much more in common than we do in difference. Yeah. And that acknowledgement is becoming, I believe, a beautiful source of the kingdom is got its final expansion to include everyone.
Yes.
And now the only thing that keeps you out is your own definition of the kingdom.
Yeah. I don't want to be right for the sake of being right about this. I want to be right about this so that I can include. So that I can discover what is that humanity shouldn't look at one another that I am right and you are wrong, as opposed to seeing themselves within one another.
It's interesting. I have people close in my life who, you know, I love what you teach, everything that, but, you know, I love the fact that you say Jesus is non-negotiable. I'm like, I say that, but I'll be honest, I don't mean it the way you think I mean it. Right? You're coming from the Christian world where you think I mean you're out if you don't have Jesus.
Yeah.
What I really mean is Jesus is. There's nothing you can do about it. He is non-negotiable, and whether or not you confess his name, whether or not, I'm simply I'm giving him his due and defining that logic is the mind we all have.
Yes.
It is the thing that makes us the extension of God. We are God 2.0 because logic has framed it and holds that together. Jesus is, whether you confess him or not, whether you understand the cross or not. When I say Jesus is non-negotiable, I don't mean the Christian version of that phrase. I mean, he's there, and the New Age religion has largely demoted him or ignored him, and I'm simply saying, nope, this is who he is. And I think the more and more it gets framed, the more and more they realize that non-negotiable doesn't mean you must agree.
That's right.
It means whether you agree or not, he's there.
Yes. And it's the same as looking at if you take the word Jesus out and you place it with logic, it looks like a different picture. And if you take logic out and you put truth there, it looks like a similar picture, and all of a sudden it becomes so much more inclusive.
Yeah.
So much more inclusive of the journey that each of us are on.
the non-negotiability of the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit is so non-negotiable. It don't matter if you believe them or not, because you got them.
That's right.
You're living in them, and we're all living in them, and that's a whole nother level of thinking about it. That I'm sure there's people listening that are going to go, "Wait, did he just say what I think he said?"
Yeah.
Yes, I did. And in about 3 years from now,
Yeah.
you'll realize just how deep that really goes.
Yeah. If you're a Christian and you're listening to it and you look through John 17, that picture becomes so much more clear.
So much more. Well, thank you so much, man.
Yeah.
We're going to have a lot of fun continuing some discussions. We're going to do some more episodes together.
Yes.
And
I look forward to it.
I love you like you're my brother.
Love you too, man. It's great. I'm excited to see this grow.
I am too. Yeah, we've gotten some starting to get organic followers and stuff like that. People I've never met, nobody I know knows. Starting to get out there, so
it's beautiful.
Yeah, that's really cool. Actually, my wife was actually encouraging me. She's like, "You should tell people." So we have upwards of 250 people a month, unique listeners per month right now.
Yeah.
It started at 12.
Yeah.
And we're only 3 months in. And if you know anything about how this works, the exponential growth, if it's something, I believe that there's many people who've been looking for home.
Yes.
Right? They've been looking for a framework. When somebody asked me for years, what do you believe? Where do you go to church? I had no answer. Now I do.
Absolutely.
New Age Christianity. I have and I don't even usually mention that I founded it or anything like that. I just say there's a website. Go check it out. It's a new concept. It's being defined as we speak. And it's really nice to have something to call home.
Yeah.
And a group of people to, call my family in that way.
And it's beautiful because instead of it being a place to be, it's a way to be.
Yes. And
It's
it
a
is
way.
embracing what the world is becoming anyway.
Yes.
Which is digital, virtual, decentralized. And it is, it's putting out these things in such a way. The goal is to put it out in such a way as that you don't have to agree.
Right.
And that is, I believe, something that the world has been waiting for, a spiritual voice to stand up and say that. I think one of the next episodes we'll do is you do end up getting into the philosopher trap, where we can pontificate for days and days and days and not come up with any answers.
Yeah.
And that's also not the answer.
True.
Because there are truths, there are answers,
yes.
and maybe we'll talk about that on the next one.
That'd be great.
So, thank you guys for listening, and as always, if you just consider donating between you and the Holy Spirit, we appreciate those of you who do consider it, and we will see you on the next episode. Thanks, guys.